And now, living in the new artificial intelligence era, please welcome Amir Baradaran, founder, CEO at ABXR Engine.
This goes back. Yeah. All right, fantastic. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes? All right, great. Wonderful. So, change of plan. We'll try to go really fast today. I know everybody's tired and also we are running behind. So, let me present. So, yes, I'm the founder of ABXR Engine. We automate content creation for augmented reality, and questions of spatial computing data is very critical to us in terms of what do we aggregate, how do we make sense of the data that we have. So the talk I'm giving is it's a little bit outside of what I do, but more on the theoretical level. Okay, can we have the timer here so I know my time as well? Yeah. All right. So a lot of conversations around data governance or AI, when it comes to ethics around AI, is framed within the notion of privacy. And there's a fallacy of privacy, or the way it's being framed, because it really doesn't understand what the concept of AI is altogether. AI has nothing to do with individuality, right? For AI to work, you need big data. For big data to work, you need a massive amount of data from a large number of people. So the conversations around individualism or individuality is definitely a fallacy, and that notion of privacy is not the right framework to think about it. I'll try to go fast here. I want to just walk through very quickly what the current AI ecosystem is, and I'll walk you through what an alternative AI ecosystem could look like. So, as you probably know, majority of our AI that's being produced is within a very oligarchical ecosystem where the big tech is the owner and is the aggregator of the data. The raw input, the raw material is our everyday lives, basically, is the voluntary kind of information that we share with big tech. But there is more than that, right? So there is exploitative data that's really the strategic part of data aggregation that takes place. And that's really majority part of that data that's being collected. So to give you an example, if you open an account and you enter your information, or if you're talking to Alexa or Google, at the moment you're having a conversation, you're aware of the fact that there is this exchange of data, aggregation of data that's taking place. Exploitative would be when you are in the room and your phone is the camera is on, is aggregating. Let's say you're reading news article on your phone. It's recognizing your face, doing facial detection, emotional kind of personality trait detection as well, correlating that with the line of the news that you're reading, and depending on your emotional response, it will make a judgment based on you. So that would be exploitative kind of information. Why the big data? So very quickly, so the big data is being used to improve what I call the storyteller, or the machine, or the robot, or the bot that we have. That's one component of it. The second component is really to process the data through that storyteller and tell stories. So I kind of conceptualize this based on storage, where we are aggregating raw material as well as processed data, and the storyteller who really sits somewhere in between the two and mitigating that information. What comes out of it? Again, it's, what we know comes out of it is overt, but that's a very, very small part of that data that comes out. there's a covert part of that data that comes out, which is what mitigates, for example, how the big tech identifies your news feed, right? How it coordinates your news feed, how it curates your news feed, for example. So that would be the covert part of it, and that's really the part that we should take issue with. This is where usually when you talk about conversations around ethics of AI, it's really about that covert kind of stories that are being published, that are being pushed out of your machine in a way. All right, so we have raw data, we have processed data, so we have stories, and in addition to that, so as the machine is getting bigger and bigger, what really happens is that there are technical expertise, there are APIs, there are technical knowledge that's being created as well, and that in itself becomes a purpose through which, for which the data is being aggregated. So, and that technical service is what really generates sources of revenue as well for our big tech in a way. Now, up to now, what we have really been seeing with Web 2.0 is that AI is a predictor of our behavior, right? So we kind of know through natural language processing, through our adoption, mass adoption of Web 2.0. So be it your smartphones, content that you see on the web, that you consume on the web, the cameras, the photos you upload, all of these kind of components, each of which have really contributed to the creation of certain type of AI that we call narrow AI, so natural language processing, face and body detection, and so on and so forth. But the problem is that these narrow AIs now are really being kind of all put together, and that's through spatial computing. So, and that's the kind of work that we do. You saw earlier today the metaverse conversations that was taking place at the introduction. So imagine now with the trillions of dollars that are being spent on spatial computing, by that I mean AR and VR, so augmented reality and virtual reality. If you're wearing your headsets, if you're wearing your glasses on, then you almost are transforming every single individual, every single one of us into an augmented informant. So it's no longer that your phone kind of moves around and knows where you are, or your Alexa at home can hear what you say throughout the day and make sense of that data and collect that data. But it's really the glasses, and the really most important part of that is that you have the glasses that provide sight to the AI itself, right? So it's the aggregation of all these kind of narrow AIs that we talk about that really makes the spatial AI a very scary AI. And the big question is, who owns that AI? And who is responsible? And how do we mitigate our relationship? How do we mediate our relationship with that spatial AI? The other problem that we have is really that it's no longer Web 2.0 now, right? Where we would predict what you would like to see and therefore provide you with, advertising that's targeted towards you. What's really happening through augmented reality and virtual reality is that there's social engineering that's taking place. Social engineering, Dr. Zuboff really talks about it in terms of surveillance capitalism. I recommend you reading that if you're interested in ethics of AI. And it's about these three components that really shape the way in which we behave. So it's no longer predicting how we behave, but more so about kind of shaping how we will behave. It's in this really context that we need to come up with alternative ways of frameworks and theoretical thinking in that space. And one of the main things is that we have talked about users all this time, and it's usually a one-sided thing. It has no kind of reference to the very fact that we as users are producers of the very data, the raw data, based on which these AIs have come to exist. I myself have used citizen users, but that in itself is great. It talks about, let me have some water here. It talks about the rights of citizens, but the better terminology that I would like to propose is citizen producers, and that's because it identifies the production of data as labor. All right, so this is the current ecosystem. As you can see, there's a lot of dollar signs all around. The moment there's exchange of data that's taking place between the big tech and small tech, there's dollar signs attached to it. And basically, the user really is left outside of that ecosystem without any control over what and how that data is being produced or the kind of machine learning algorithm that's being created as well. So what is an alternative ecosystem and what does it look like? So to create an alternative ecosystem, a lot of people have talked about basically providing a copy of the data that the big tech is aggregating to provide that copy to the user. There are two problems with that. Is that big tech, there are very low regulations around that, so they usually maybe give 10%, maybe 5% of the data that I already have. But the bigger problem is that let's say I have the data. The bigger question is, sorry. So let's say so here as you can see, I want to have the data, and it would be that each user will kind of carry with themselves a copy of all the data that is being aggregated on them. So that sounds really good in practice, but in theory, but in practice, there are a lot of technological kind of challenges around that. Is that even if you have the data, wait a second, how are you going to control the data? How are you going to keep the data? How are you going to store the data? And more important than that, what are you going to do with that data? As we discussed earlier, AI is not an individual thing. So you could sit with all your data that you have accumulated throughout your entire life, and you're still not capable of creating proper machine learning based on that. So it really requires us to think about a second component of that. And that's really the alternative that we're proposing based on the research that I did at the Rockefeller Foundation with a couple of my colleagues, and that's collective AI. So what would happen if each user was able to have access to their own data? We would provide the interoperability, we would provide the kind of infrastructure to do that, but each of them would be able to then aggregate their data, come together as a unionized environment to make their own AI. This really becomes very theoretical, very at the high level right now, but there are examples of these kinds of alternative thinking that's really burgeoning within the conversations around AI. And it would happen, based on demographics, based on your profession, based on your geographic kind of affiliations, but it will be, here you go. So there would be different kind of pockets of AI, collective AIs that will kind of happen around the world, around a country per se, and that these particular collective AIs, unionized collective AIs, would be able to talk to one another to create that ultimate spatial collective AI. Now, there are a lot of challenges around that. We know. For example, we need to come up with a whole series of new jobs and job description in terms of how to do that. But it's not very far-fetched from the kind of processes we have already created. So for example, we would need trusted fiduciaries, right? But these trusted fiduciaries, we already have common laws. Unfortunately, I'm not very familiar with what laws we're practicing in Jordan, but in US, we have common laws of fiduciary obligations. This is the laws that your doctor, your lawyer, and your accountants have to abide by. And they have to abide by care, confidentiality, and loyalty. So that means that trusted entity that serves as the representative of your data, that proposes the creation of alternative kind of AI ecosystem, would have to be based on care, confidentiality, and loyalty as a way of as opposed to, let's say, corporate interest. We also have to come up with independent regulators, and these are big conversations to be had right now. But again, we have something similar in the past as well, which is consumer protected bodies. So we have some similarities in terms of what has been done in the past. We just need to kind of better understand the ecosystem and see how we can utilize these. Now, you may say, okay, Amir, why are you even caring about the big tech making money or trying to have our data? I'm very happy with what I have right now. The problem is, as you saw, for one, there is definitely an asymmetry of knowledge, asymmetry of power that's taking place as the corporate and the big tech kind of is opening up its panache, if you want. It has about 20 years of data that has aggregated with glasses. Even further data is going to be aggregated. So we definitely need to have an alternative kind of AI environment that speaks the same language the same language as the AI of the big tech. There's no human interaction here. You as a human, you saw the conversations right before this. You know, humans, there's no way you can counterbalance the level of the scale and the scope of the power of the AI itself. So you need to come up with an AI that can mitigate and mediate that process for you, that can say, hey, this story that you're telling about me may not be right. The kind of news feed that you're feeding me right now, I will mitigate that, I'll mediate that, and I don't want to have this kind of news, for example, and so on and so forth. But the second part, which is even more interesting for me, is that a lot of big tech, they sit on enormous amounts of data. And unfortunately, the type of algorithm that they build based on the data they aggregate often happens to be based on their corporate interest. So what really happens, you have something like often a huge number, sometimes up to 90% of the data that's being unused, that's kind of falling on the floor of the cutting table. And those are the kind of data that could be used towards the common good. Those are the kind of data that could be used towards a particular purpose that may not provide a financial benefit to the company, but it may be very much beneficiary for the people whose data it sits upon. So these are the two reasons we really need to think about this alternative environment, and that collective spatial AI would look like something like this. As you can see, every time a digital producer is in contact with an entity, be it a big tech or a smaller tech, that environment is being mitigated by the collective AI, and also the possibility of having a human interface that explains what's going on to every single one of us who may not have the knowledge of what's going on. There are a lot of challenges, design questions. How do you even design the interface for people to understand their own data? We are talking about billions of lines of codes and data. What are the protocols? What's the security purpose of that? These are big questions to be had. And policy. So what are the rights? Who owns it? And what are the governing kind of processes that we need to follow in order to make sense of this alternative collective environment? The good news is that, again, we have done this in the past. I was asking earlier if in Jordan there is, thank you, in Jordan there is universal healthcare, unlike the US. It seems that there is. Same thing in Canada, where I grew up. So Canada has come up basically with an interface that says healthcare is a right for people, right? Is not a privilege, is a right. Within that environment, we have come to say, okay, so we are going to train the medical field, the medical people so that we have a regulation in terms of who becomes a doctor, who becomes a surgeon, and so on and so forth. So we have regulation around how that information, that knowledge is being created. The second part is that there are also, just to give you the example, there are pharmacists who then take the information that your doctor gives you and they make sense of all the pills that you're taking, right? So that becomes the human interface that comes in and explains what that very much kind of difficult or complex knowledge of medicine is, and explains it to you in the way you want. And ultimately, you have UI and UX. You have literally, we have come up with like bottles, different shapes of pills, and an interface such as writing on the pill to say what the things are. So this is, for me, a really good example to think about how it is possible to utilize our existing kind of governing agencies in regards to other fields of knowledge and kind of extrapolate from that to make something better. And to end on a very good note is that we are not alone doing that. There are a lot of other entities around the world that are pushing for different parts of they're trying to solve different parts of the challenge in a way. And you have both in terms of human infrastructure and technological infrastructure that's taking place right now. I'll stop here. Thank you so much.
Is this yours? Is this yours? Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you found this both useful today and enjoyable. I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow to hear more speakers, and have a very good night. Thank you.